Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be going over the latest information about the avian flu cattle news with the H5N1. In general, before I start, the risk factors for humans is very low, and I'll give you details on why that is. Okay, so let's go through a few bullet points here. The CDC back in December of 2023 detected animals in the United States with this H5N1 Clade 2.3.4.4b. Now, this 2.3.4.4b is a Eurasia lineage. It's based on a goose that came from Guangdong. All right. And in Europe, this sequence also popped up in October of 2021. The base sequence for 2.3.4.4b is A/goose/Guangdong/1/1996. So this is a 1996 sequence. Now, cattle in 2024 in the United States started contracting this version, or a version that's similar. Let's just call it similar. And there are different areas of the genome that researchers look at. All right, different gene segments. So there's a similar genotype for the P. I'm going to give you some different areas of the genome that they look at. The PA, the HA, and the M gene segments they are tied to a genotype of B3.13. All right, and this is similar to the Eurasia sequence. Now the PB2 and the PB1 and the MP and the NS gene segments, they are found in American wild birds. Okay. Now in the human samples, so what they did was they took samples from cattle, samples from dairy, the dairy product, and the milk, and human samples people that contracted. Now, in the human samples, they looked at the HA gene sequence. All right. And it's closely related to the 2.3.4.4b clade in birds, but it's lacking certain types of amino acid changes. Okay. Now, for the HA gene from human samples, it's closely related to two different types of influenza. American Wygian/South Carolina /22-00345-001/2021, and also A/*Astrac Han /3212/2020 dash like. So these are sequences that came from 2020 and 2021 that this H sequence from the human samples, they're very similar to these sequences, and that there are antibodies that are already in production. All right. So they can block the HA. Now the N1 NA gene analysis of the humans versus human samples. So you don't have to worry about the NA inhibitors not working. They do work. So NA can be blocked by the NA inhibitor. So the antivirals work. The NA stalk, now this is important. The NA stalk is long, which is normal in birds. So that means that in the human sample, with the stalk being long, it's not supercharged. It's not so my hypothesis that this was not a lab leak seems to be correct, because the NA stalk is long in these humans, in the human samples, and in the cattle samples. So that basically means that there seems to be a singular event, zoonotic event between birds and cattle, and then the cattle to the human. And they all of these have the larger stalk for the NA gene. Okay, the NA gene produces a protein, and usually when there's more problematic human transmission, that stalk is truncated. That did not happen. So it's not supercharged. Other outbreaks usually have a 20 amino acid deletion for the NA stalk, which is not the case in these samples. Okay. So, and this is all related. The 20 deletion is related to the base sequence, which is the A-goose-guandong. I'm sorry, A/goose/guandong/1/1996. Okay, so the risk is very low. Big reason is that the stalk for the NA is short for the NA protein. All right. Now, there's also other genes that are looked at, the M and the NS. So you have an M1 and an M2, and you have an N1 and an N2. These genes show no mutation markers for mammal adaptation. Okay. So because the stalk is long for the NA, and the M and the NS proteins are not mutated, this looks like a single zoonotic event. Okay. Now there are other proteins that are looked at, and there's something called a polymerase basic protein 1 and 2, and short for BP, PB2, polymerase basic protein 2, is part of, it helps with the RNA polymerase activity, and it helps with replication. So the PB2 mutation helps with replication in mammals. So there's a replication complex, and that complex is created by the BP2, the BP1, I'm sorry, PB1 and PB2 and BA, PA. I'm sorry, I'm tired because it's very late. It's been doing this. It's 4 o'clock in the morning right now. All right, let me rephrase this. Replication complex is PB2, PB1, and PA and NP. That all those together, those four different proteins, they work as a complex to replicate as a that's what's called a replication complex. All right. Now, what that will do is help to replicate the virus. Now, if there's mutations, it can either attenuate and become have less ability to replicate, or it can have a mutation in certain species to have it replicate more often. There's a lack of a mutation in these samples for the human. Now, let me rephrase that. There's a lack of mutation for 3/4 of the complex. Okay. That 3/4 of the complex that's not mutated is the PB1, PA, and the NP. There's no mutation, but there is a mutation for the PB2. That mutation is E627K. And it's compared to, it's also, common in cattle and in birds. Okay, so it's not a mutation that needs to be worried about. No human to human transmission has been detected. The antivirals, what is it called? Baloxavar, My writing is terrible. Baloxar and marboxyl on the PA protein works. Amididine and ramanidine for the M2 protein works. So basically the antivirals work. All right. So there are sequences that are still being done as they're doing the samplings for surveillance. But the bottom line here is this. There is a sequence, okay? The base sequence that's being compared is 2.3.4.4b, which is a goose from Guangdong back in 1996. And we are seeing some of these things popping up in 2023 and in 2021. The 2021 was in Europe, and the 2023 looks like it started in the United States. There may have been also cases of this in 2020 in the United States. Now, what's interesting is that there's research in laboratory manipulation through, gain of function research that starts in 2021 of April. And it's dual between the United States, the UK, and China. Now, from the samples from the cattle and from the samples from the birds, the humans, what can be interpreted at this moment in time is that because the stalk, the NA stalk is short, I'm sorry, is long, not short, it's long, then that would mean that you don't really have a virus that's floating around with the birds to the cattle and the cattle to the humans that has good human transmission. And that also prevents, that long stalk also seems to be preventing human to human transmission. If it was lab manipulated, it would be supercharged and that stalk would be shorter. So this looks like a zoonotic event. Now, in addition, you don't have the mutations in the other replication complex, like polymerase basic protein 1 and the PA and the NP that would help with replication. That would be found in serial passage gain of function research. You would see some sort of mutation there to enhance replication. That did not show up. There is a mutation in the PB2, but that mutation is a known mutation that is E627K. So there's nothing really new coming from that when you're comparing it to the cattle and the birds. So the replication, again, is somewhat muted because it doesn't have the 3/4 of the replication complex is not mutated for the benefit of this avian flu to be in mammals. Again, there's no human to human transmission, and the antivirals for different proteins still work. All right, so you have it in the PA and you have the M2 proteins, they can be inhibited. We can also inhibit the HA through certain types of antibodies. So this looks to me that this 2.3.4b case with the cattle and the humans looks to be a zoonotic event. It's not supercharged. My original feeling on this several weeks ago was that this was not supercharged. And based on the analysis of the sequences from the samples, that's true. This is the conclusion from the CDC. So my conclusion on this is that it's very low risk for humans, and that this is not a lab leak. So that's my overall take on it. I apologize if I seem a bit tired, but I've been up all night looking at this, and it's time for me to fall asleep. So thank you for listening and have a nice night.